All right, guys, welcome to 5.3. We're finally in section 5.3. We spent some time in 5.2. This section is all about unit rates. So we've learned about ratios. Ratios and rates go hand in hand. The first thing we're going to fill out here today is a blank is a ratio of two different quantities using different blanks. A rate is a ratio of two different quantities using different units. A unit rate compares a quantity to one unit, underline that word one, is very important, compares a quantity to one unit of another quantity. Rates are blank if they share the same unit rate. Rates are equivalent if they share the same unit rate. So some example of rates would be, like it says up here, ratios of two different quantities using different units. So for a rate, let's say I sleep 8 hours per night. Well, I've got two different quantities using different units. Here's my units, hours and nights, and my different quantities would be 8 and 1. I sleep 8 hours per one night. Another example would be I blink 5 times per 20 seconds. My different quantities are 5 and 20, and my units are times versus second. I blink 5 times every 20 seconds. Another example would be I purchase 1 pizza for every 4 people. Units would be pizza to people, and I purchase 1 pizza for every 4 people. If we take a look here, I'm going to zoom in. At this rate, we have 3 pizza boxes for $27. This concept of a unit rate says it compares a quantity to one unit of another quantity. All right, well, I've got a rate of $27 for 3 pizzas. Unit rate is, well, how much would it be for 1 pizza? That's what a unit rate is. Looking at our other rates over here, we've got I sleep 8 hours per one night. That's a unit rate. I blink 5 times per 20 seconds. Well, my unit rate would be how many times do you blink per 1 second? How many pizzas do you buy per one person, for every one person? So that unit rate has a lot to do with the number 1 unit. Our unit rate for pizzas would be if I buy 27 pizzas, if I spend $27 on 3 pizzas, the unit rate would be $9 for 1 pizza. How much does it cost for 1 unit? All right, for example number 1, we're going to look at writing a rate. So this doesn't have to do with unit rates yet. This is just writing a rate. This double number line shows the rate at which you earn points for successfully hitting notes in a music video game. Write a rate that represents the situation. Think about video games like Guitar Hero. You earn points every time you successfully hit the correct note or the correct thing, whatever it is that you're doing, the correct beat. This double number line shows us we get so many points for every correct notes that we hit. They give us the example we earn 600 points when we hit 4 correct notes, successfully hitting those notes. Write another rate for this situation. Well, I can see a bunch of other rates. I see 0 to 0, 150 to 1. What that means is choose any number of points that you see up top here and make a rate using how many successful notes they had to choose. One example would be 150 points for 1 note. You could also write in 300 points for 2 notes, 450 points for 3 notes, 750 points for 5 notes, or even 0 points for 0 notes. All of those could go in this area here to write another note for this situation. Example number 2, finding a unit rate. So this is dealing with that concept of 1. A piece of space junk travels 5 miles in 8 seconds. How far does it travel per second? How far does it travel every 1 second? So we have this ratio, or this rate, 5 miles, 8 seconds. Let's go ahead and fill that in our table. The distance is 5 miles in the time of 8 seconds. What they're asking us is how far does it travel per second? That would be 1 second. So this is my seconds column having to do with time. I want to fill in 1 there. What I need to find out is my unknown here. If I go from 8 to 1, what's the relationship there? How do I go from 8 to 1? Well, really, couldn't I just divide by 8 to get to 1? I could. So if I'm going to divide the bottom by 8, I must have to divide the top by 8. Now 5 divided by 8, that's kind of funky, but what I can write in here is a fraction of 5/8. So in order to answer this question, how far does a piece of space junk travel in 1 second? 5/8 of a mile per second. So just to reiterate what we did there, whenever we want to find the unit rate, we can take this number here. To get to 1, we just divide by this bottom number. We'd have to divide the top number up here by the bottom number as well to find the unit rate. That's one way to find the unit rate. We could also use proportions. We're going to skip this problem for a sec. We'll come back to it. Go ahead down to the bottom. Example 2b. Let's use the same problem. The space junk traveling 5 miles in 8 seconds. Let's use a proportion to find the unit rate. So let's again set up our table. We've got distance over time. We know that our ratio is going to be 5 over 8 again, because we're still traveling 5 miles in 8 seconds. I want to know how far it travels per second, so that's 1 second. Here's my unknown. We know how to set up our proportion. 5 over 8 equals, let's call it d over 1, in order to solve for this unknown right here. So let's set that up. Cross multiply. I'm going to do my work just a little bit lower. 5 times 1 equals 8 times d. 5 equals 8d. Divide each side by 8. Again, we end up with 5/8. Let's see if I can fit that in. Equals d. So 5/8 of a mile per second is how far that space junk, that stuff flying in space, goes. 5/8 of a mile every second. We could turn that into a decimal too. If we did 5 divided by 8, we went up with 0.625 of a mile for every second that it's in space. That's how far it travels. Let's go ahead back up for a second. We've got this Japanese bullet train. That's a really, 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 really fast train. It travels 558 miles in 3 hours. How far does it travel every hour? So there's our unit rate we're looking for. How far does it travel every 1 hour? Well, we can go ahead and set up a table here. We've got distance over time again. We know that it travels 558 miles every 3 hours. Well, how far does that train travel every 1 hour? Well, we have to figure that out. To get from 3 to 1, what could I divide by? 3. So if I want to get from 558 to do the same thing, divide by 3. 558 divided by 3, you can go ahead and put it in your calculator. We end up with a number of 186. So every hour, the train travels 186 miles per hour. Notice miles per hour is a lot like speed limit signs that you might see. So miles per hour, speed limit signs are examples of rates. They're examples of unit rates, actually. Something you can share with your family next time you're spending some time in the car. This is the second part of the 5.3 lesson. We're going to pick up with this on another day. I'm going to stop this video now. So if you are at this point, we're not going to go any further in the notes today. You can go ahead and move on to the next part of the lesson that I, Miss Laverty, tell you to do in class today. Let me know if you have any questions so far from examples 1 and 2 on the previous slides.